Welcome, welcome. I am so glad you are here. I am Laureen Quick, and I guide women 50 and older who find themselves in the middle of change. When something familiar has ended, something new hasn't quite yet begun, and the old ways of moving forward just don't seem to fit anymore. This conversation is an invitation to you, my viewers, to join us for the Next Chapter Summit, a gathering created for women navigating change, reinvention, and renewal after 50. The summit is not about fixing yourself or rushing to any kind of answers. It's really about slowing down, listening honestly, and having meaningful conversation with women who understand what it's like to stand at the edge of a threshold. So many women in midlife are carrying losses that don't always have a name, like grief, for example, but there are endings without ceremonies, endings that create shifts that are quiet and internal, yet deeply shaping. And that is why I am honored to be joined today with Gabby Jimenez, one of our summit speakers. Gabby's work invites women to slow down, honor grief in all its forms, not as something to move past or fix as fast as you can, but as something that deserves care, time, and witnessing. Gabby brings a deep reverence for both visible and invisible grief, especially the quieter endings that accompany life's transitions and thresholds. What you're about to hear is not a lesson, it's not even a preview of Gabby's session. It's really a glimpse into the tone of our summit. The tone that I like to say is warm, reflective, spacious, and deeply human. And if you're listening and recognize yourself here, please, I hope this conversation gives you a glimpse into whether or not you should attend, whether or not you should join us as a summit for support and care and kindness. So, Gabby, let's just begin. I am so glad that you are here, and I'm so thrilled to have you as one of our guest speakers at the Next Chapter Summit. I'm going to just ask my first question right away. When women over 50 come to you during a time of change in their life, what kinds of losses or endings do you notice that they are often carrying, even if they don't initially name them as grief?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you right now and also to join you in the summit. So I'm looking forward to that moment. But I think, I was really thinking about this question. I'm really glad you gave me the questions prior to this because it got me into a lot of deep thought. I call it unnamed endings, right? The things that we grieve.
Mhm.
There's grieving the body that we used to have, the energy that we once had, roles that once defined us as women, mothering in the same way, caregiving, being needed in very visible ways. There's often grief around identity, who we were then, who we are now. When we are hitting 50, I'm 61, so I've gone through that. And
Mhm.
I think what happens is there's this comparison, right, to how we once were. And there's this maybe this sense of responsibility that we're supposed to continue being that way, but we're changing, we're
Mhm.
evolving. And I do think that falls under grief because there's this feeling of missing what once was and not quite making peace with who we are now. And that's something that has to change.
I think you're absolutely right, and it's not something that we talk about. right?
No,
We all are going through this and we don't understand it. And at the same time, no one said, oh, by the way, when you are in your 50s or your 60s, this is probably some kind of thing that's going to happen to you and you might want to be prepared for it.
right.
So I think it's so important that you name it, and then we can begin to talk about how we are going through it and how we want to go through it, right?
Yes, and I think it's also tied to expectations. Perhaps in our earlier years, we had this idea of where we would be at this time. And if we're not there, there's this sense of maybe failure. You know, I should have been here by now. I should have done this by now. And so we set these unrealistic expectations and then we punish ourselves for that. And I think we need to stop doing that and accept where we are, at least learn how to accept where we are, because it's kind of exciting. If I look back now and I think about my 50s compared to my 40s, I loved being in my 50s. And now that I'm 60, I look back and I think, gosh, there are things I would have done differently. But when you look back, you look at it all as though this is exactly how it was supposed to be. So I think what we need to do is stop setting expectations and stop punishing ourselves for not being where we think we thought we should have been, if that
Uh,
makes sense.
yeah, absolutely. And I think also it connects into this whole idea that we judge ourselves, right?
Yes.
That somehow we come up short
Yes.
and and we hold ourselves, we blame ourselves for whatever it is or wherever it is that we
Absolutely.
are. And honestly, the reality is when I look at my own life, and I'm 67, when I look at my own life, I do have sometimes those moments when I have that grief that you just shared, where I feel like, oh, I missed the boat on that. Why did it take me so long to figure this out? Why, and I'm behind, or I didn't make that happen, or whatever that might be. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I am living such an incredible life and I am truly such an amazing woman. Oh, what am I worried about? And how much time do I still have? I have a whole lot of time still left. I can correct that if I want to, or I can just let it go, if it's not really that important. But there is this grief that we have for who we thought we were going to be. Um, and who we were because like you said, we're changing, we're constantly changing and evolving and growing, and we leave ourselves behind, that past behind, as we do that, the more we do that.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think also many women, they struggle with whether their grief counts, especially when it's not tied to death. So it sort of sounds like, well, maybe you're just being kind of a feeling sorry for yourself. Maybe you're just you know, being so critical of who you are that you've lost perspective. So we end up judging ourselves for feeling this way as well, right?
Yes.
So how can we, or what can we do to help women recognize and honor that this is a time in our life when grief will be present, and we don't want to just ignore it. We don't want to just push it aside as frivolous or not important. What can we do?
Well, first of all, I think what we have to do is maybe, first of all, own who we are and be accepting of that. Make peace with that. I wish I knew in my 50s what I know in my 60s because I would have been a little less hard on myself.
Absolutely.
And I think what helps is reframing grief not as something that only follows death, but as the emotional, I'm reading from my notes because I have to say this one part and I don't want to miss this part, but as the emotional response to change and loss of meaning. If something mattered, if it shaped you, if it's ending or shifting, your grief already counts. I
Mhm.
think we have to give ourselves permission to feel how we feel, but we also have to take ownership and responsibility. If we don't like it, we need to do something about it. But one of the other things that I have learned, at least in my experience, is that our body talks to us. Okay. So listen to your bodies. And remember that if there's behaviors like irritability, exhaustion, numbness, or longing, right? Just some of these are just a few of them. These are not failures to cope. They're signals asking to be witnessed. Our body tells us when we got to make a change, we got to do things a little differently. And I think maybe if I could give any advice to 50-year-old women, it's pay attention to your body. You're going to have to make some changes, but
Uh,
change is good. We are adjusting to a new way of living. We're not in our 40s anymore, but that doesn't mean we're dead. It means we're just 10 years older. And it's an era. It's a time frame. It's 10 great, wonderful years that you get to decide how it looks. Give yourself permission, but own it and take responsibility for it. If you don't like it, change it.
I love that. And I think everything that you said is so, so true. And I mean, I look at my own life and I feel exactly that way, that this is the best time of my life.
Mhm.
This is truly, it sounds crazy when I tell people this, but it's like these decades are the best time because I am only responsible for me,
Ah, it's
right?
wonderful.
I I get to decide. I get to have choices. And I love that freedom that came to me as all those old roles, those other things I did became minimal and eventually even have disappeared. You know, my children, they don't need me anymore. I love them. We love to be together, but they don't need me to help them do anything. So my time is free. And the choices I get to make about how I live my life and where I go and what I do are mine to make. And if I'm miserable, it is, like you said, my job to change that, fix
Yeah.
that, correct that. Yes.
Absolutely. And stop comparing yourself to other women. You are going to meet women who are also in their 50s or 60s who may have a better job than you, maybe have a better relationship, or maybe are not in a relationship and living the time of their life, or maybe they dress a certain way, or they have more money, or whatever. If you are comparing yourself to someone else, you haven't made peace with who you are. Once you make peace with who you are and you accept yourself, flaws and all, life is a lot easier. It's
It
when we
really
start
is.
comparing ourselves and punishing ourselves for not being where we thought we should be or whatever, not being like Susie next door. But you're better off not being Susie next door. There's already a Susie next door. I love who I am now. It took me a while to get here. And again, I wish I knew at my 50s what I know now. I would have savored them a little bit more. They're a gift.
Don't you ever ask yourself, I wonder if in my 70s I'll say the same thing. And what
Yes.
would it be that I would say? What would I look back in my 70s and say, oh, Lorraine, if only you knew this, right? Um, yeah.
Actually, I think in my 70s, because I know what I know now, I'm going to look back and go, girl, you did 60 proud. Because that's how I want to be. And if you're just turning 50 now, do 50 proud. Because we only
Exactly.
get this chance once. And the 50s, from what I hear, are the new 40s. So there you go. But yeah, just savor it. All of it.
So we live, we live with this balance of we have this grief and we do want to honor, I do want to honor my grief. I want to recognize it and I want to honor it, but then I want to go beyond it. I mean, I always think about my husband passed away and my two daughters and I sat down and said, okay, your father's died, my husband's dead. Where do we want to go from here? We can be miserable for the next 20, 30 years of our lives and say we're victims that, this man in our life died and now he's not here and our whole world fell apart and we've never been whole since then. Or we can decide to live our lives whole and happy. Which one do you want to do? And we all three of us said we want to be whole and we want to be happy. And so we made that choice. And it sounds like maybe it's not as easy as you would think, but it is in some ways just as easy as you think. It's time to embrace where we are in life, who we are, and go out and live it to the max, live it to the full, right?
Live to the max. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to just ask another quick question here without giving away what you're going to be talking about and exploring in the summit. Um, how have you learned to sit with grief, to not just move past it, but to actually allow grief to become a source of wisdom, especially during times of change?
That's exactly what it is. Because grief tells us what we've loved. Now, there is no D at the end of love when someone dies, right? We love them and we always will. Well, can't we have that same feeling about our life and the changes? We we just get older and wiser with each year, with each decade. And I think that we need to look at our grief as something that it's taught us. We can get stuck. We become consumed. We make our whole life about our grief, but no one benefits from that.
Hmm.
It's okay to put it on a shelf for a little bit. I don't think it's good to ignore it. I think we need to sit with it, talk to it, work with it, figure out how we're going to deal with it, maybe get some professional counseling or therapy to work through it. But you have not died with what you are missing or what is lost. We can't wrap ourselves in it and curl under the covers and hide. I think we need to face it. I think we need to look at it for exactly what it is. But I love what you said too. We have two choices. We can stay here or we can move forward. Moving forward does not dismiss what you had. Those
No,
are our memories. That was our life. That was our experience. It was because of that that I am who I am now. And I'm grateful for that. And I can move forward without dragging a big bag of bricks around me, punishing myself. No one would want that for us. So I think that we have to move forward with grace and ease. And we need to find people that we can talk about how we feel.
hmm,
It might be a great idea to join other groups that are going through it, but not the ones that bring you down because some will. Some get stuck in their grief. Some gather together and celebrate the things that were then and the things that will be. And I think that we have to give ourselves permission to get a little excited about what might be.
becoming. I think that's, balance, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, because we can get lost in grief, whether it's grieving for someone we've lost or grieving for a life we thought we were going to have.
Yes.
And I don't want my grief to define me,
No.
but I do want it to advise me, guide me in how I
I
live my
love that.
life.
I love the advise me part. I wrote in my notes, wisdom doesn't come from bypassing pain. It comes from listening long enough to understand it.
Yep,
We learn from these experiences. We become stronger, wiser, and more able to tackle the tough stuff. We can do hard things. We've already proven that to ourselves. And we are not our grief. We might be grieving, but we are not our grief. And we don't need to be stuck in our sadness. We are not our sadness. We can find balance, but I think we have to want to. Some people get so lost in it that they lose themselves. And I want people to avoid doing that at all costs because nothing good comes from that. And life flashes by you and you miss out on stuff. And I guess I would want people to continue to live their lives the best that they can while balancing grief and finding joy. We're allowed to find joy.
I love that. Balancing grief and finding joy.
Yeah,
Yeah, and don't forget that joy part. It's very
joy.
important.
We're allowed to find joy.
So let me ask one final question today.
Okay.
If a woman listening knows that she's grieving something real, but also feels that she's not sure that she's allowed to slow down and honor that, she's just keeping herself super, super busy. What would you want her to hear right now?
Give yourself permission to feel. I think it comes back to that same word we've used throughout this conversation, which is finding balance.
Mhm.
You're allowed to feel sad, disappointed, angry. All of those are valid feelings. But I think, just like we've been saying, it's about finding balance between life, what is, and life, what was, and not losing yourself in it. people do become consumed. And that is their whole, who they show up with all the time is that almost dark cloud. Of course they're sad. I mean, that's grief and it's life. I was
Mhm.
talking to someone today about they were only together for a few years and she's preparing to say goodbye to her husband. And she's was asking about grief. And I said, she said, we've only been together a short time. And my response was, but you had that time. Don't sit here and think about what you aren't going to have. Think about what you've had. You were gifted 3 years, which in comparison to many couples these days, that's not very much time, but you were gifted 3 years. So I think my advice would be don't sit and fester over what will never be. Savor what was. That was a gift.
That is perfect advice for us in this conversation today, and I thank you for your wisdom, for sharing that with us. I think it occurred to me, as I was listening to you talk, when we are young, we don't have a lot of grief in our life. We are
Mhm.
always looking forward. We have potential, right?
Yeah.
And then at some point, you experience a loss of potential, a
Mhm.
loss that you grieve. And then as you get older, people start dying too. I mean, this is sort of
Yeah.
average. I mean, everyone has different experiences, but then as we get older, we start losing people, as they say. And so grief becomes more prominent in our lives, but it does not have to be the definition of our life. It goes back to that balance that you just talked about, and also that seeking of joy.
You know, you're right. I think that is one thing that is going to happen more frequently as we age.
Mhm.
We are going to lose people we love. We are going to lose our pets. I have a gentleman that I look after. He's 96 and his dog died 2 days ago. And I sat with him this morning and watched him cry and he lost a wife 6 years ago and he's had loss. He's 96 and I sat and I cried with him because I know what it feels like to lose a pet and someone I love. I think we need to prepare ourselves for the next few decades that we get to be alive. It's going to get harder. We have to brace ourselves.
Mhm.
In fact, we need to count on our strength now more than ever before. It's not going to get easier, but we can do this. And maybe that's what all these years before 50 taught us and prepared us for. And I think we have to hold on tight. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
I think I think you're right. But it can also be a very joyful one, right?
Right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't stop at 50, and it certainly doesn't stop at 60. And when I turn 70, like I said, I'm going to look back and say, you did those 60s great, girl.
I think you will, my friend.
Thank you.
Before we wrap up and close, I do want to say this to all of you watching and listening. If this conversation feels like an invitation, if something in you, in what you heard, helped you recognize where you are, I want you to know that this is the kind of space we are creating throughout the Next Chapter Summit. Across 3 days and one night, you will hear from women like Gabby, guides who are here to tell you, well, they're not here to tell you who to become, but they are here to sit beside you as you navigate change, loss, renewal, and help you to discover what is quietly asking to emerge next in your life. If you are in a transition, if something has ended or is ending, or if you are sensing a new chapter forming, but you haven't quite yet figured out the language to describe it, you are warmly invited to join us. You'll find more details about the summit, including the dates and times and how to register, in the conversation notes to this recording. Gabby, I want to thank you truly from my heart for the presence, honesty, and care that you bring to this work, and for the way that you hold space for women as they navigate life's thresholds and grief and loss. We are so grateful to have you as a part of this summit. And to everyone listening, we would be honored if you would join us. If you are standing at the edge of something and you are not quite yet ready to move, but you want to move and you no longer can stay where you're at, this summit was created for you, and I hope that you will join us.
I
Thank you.
look forward to seeing all of you there.
It's going to be amazing, my friend. Thank
Yes.
you.